Why are we drawn to one person and not another? Is it our hearts speaking or our genetics? Welcome to Sleepy Dormiscience. Today we're dissecting the hidden engineering of love and those invisible algorithms behind mate selection. Sexual selection is nature's most complex decision-making mechanism. Why do we feel attracted to a specific person? This is not just an emotional state, but an evolutionary strategy. When choosing a partner, we are unconsciously searching for the healthiest and most compatible genes. Love is a chemical cocktail our brain releases to reward this genetic match. We say we fell in love, while our biology says you found the best mate. In this process, we look not only at physical traits but also at immune system compatibility and behavioral cues. Sexual selection is a massive filter designed to maintain the quality of our species. Love is the most powerful source of motivation that allows us to manage this challenging selection process. Love is not a single emotion, but a perfect fusion of three different biological and psychological systems: attraction, lust, and attachment. These three components trigger different areas in our brain, and each has entirely different evolutionary roles, like the supporting columns needed for a building to stand. When one of these three elements is missing, the structure of love begins to shake. Today at Sleepy Dormiscience, we are breaking down this complex equation. The first stage, lust, is driven by testosterone and estrogen, which ignite our reproductive instinct. This is the most basic energy nature uses to guarantee the continuity of the species. Then comes the attraction romantic love stage, where the brain turns into a dopamine factory. In this phase, the person becomes focused. Insomnia, loss of appetite, and constantly thinking about that person are proofs that the brain is locked onto the best genetic match. Here, attraction allows us to concentrate our energy on a specific partner. The final component, attachment, is the long-term guarantee of love. This bond, established through oxytocin and vasopressin, goes beyond romantic excitement and creates a deep sense of security. Evolutionarily, attachment is a biological seal that enables partners to stay together to protect and raise offspring. Lust opens the door, attraction invites you in, and attachment becomes the roof of that house. True love is when these three systems work in harmony at the same time, like a symphony. The 906090 measurements mathematically correspond to a waist-to-hip ratio of approximately 67 cents to 70 cents in evolutionary biology. This ratio is the most reliable external indicator of a woman's estrogen-progesterone balance and fertility capacity. Technically, a low waist-to-hip ratio correlates with cardiovascular health, high fertility, and a lower risk of diabetes. When the male brain perceives this ratio, it codes it as high reproductive potential, rather than a cultural perception of beauty. This is a visual certificate of quality evolved to guarantee the continuity of the species. However, the honesty of this signal relates to the distribution of adipose tissue in the body. The hourglass form that emerges when low abdominal fat, low cortisol, combines with fat accumulation in the hips and breasts, high estrogen, presents a biological ideal structure. As we always emphasize on Sleepy Dormiscience, what we call aesthetics is actually a geometric formula for survival and reproductive success. We call these measurements perfect. Nature calls them maximum efficiency. No matter where you are in the world, there is a common biological software running in our subconscious when it comes to mate selection. This software goes beyond cultural differences and directs us towards specific physical and genetic markers. Our first common ground is bilateral symmetry. How closely the facial and body features mirror each other means developmental stability in biological terms. A symmetrical partner signifies a solid biological foundation, free from genetic disorders and diseases. We call it beauty. Nature calls it a healthy genetic structure. Another universal criterion is hormonal signals. In men, a prominent jawline and broad shoulders represent high testosterone. In women, a specific waist to hip ratio represents high estrogen and fertility. These visual cues are reproductive capacity reports for our brains. However, it doesn't end with visuals alone. Our MHC major histocompatibility complex genes allow us to choose partners with different immune systems through our scent. This biological diversity is a common defense strategy that ensures offspring are much more resilient to diseases. Finally, there is a biological commonality in our age and resource management preferences. According to evolutionary psychology, both sexes lean toward partners who will maximize the chances of survival. Women generally prioritize partners with high resource providing potential and protectiveness, while men prioritize signs of youth and health. These preferences are not superficial decisions, but survival moves approved by natural selection over millions of years. As we see on Sleepy Dormiscience, love is not a coincidence. Love is the most efficient biological investment. In the biological world, mate selection is essentially a massive advertising and marketing process. Each individual announces their genetic quality to the outside world through specific signals. For example, the smoothness of the skin and the brightness of the eyes are not just aesthetic elements. They are proof of a healthy internal metabolism free from parasites. We call this attractiveness, but in evolutionary biology it means low mutation load. As we always emphasize on Sleepy Dormiscience, our subconscious scans these details even while we sleep to find the most perfect genetic copy. Another key point is the parental investment theory. Females and males have developed different strategies due to their biological constraints. Females, due to a limited number of eggs in long-term pregnancy, pursue quality over quantity, meaning they are programmed to choose protective partners who can provide resources. Males, historically, tend to pass genes to more offspring. However, in the modern world, these biological urges merge with the desire to build secure bonds and a shared future. Love is the most stable balance where these two different strategies meet in the middle. In nature, the only thing as important as survival is passing genes to the next generation. That's why our brain works like a detective specialized in analyzing the fertility and reproductive capacity of a potential partner. In both women and men, these signals are presented to the outside world through different biological indicators. For example, a specific waist-to-hip ratio in women around 70 cents, which is a reflection of estrogen levels, directly matches high fertility and the ability to give birth healthily in our subconscious. This is not just a visual preference. It's a reading of a millions of years old health report. In men, reproductive signals are generally read through high testosterone and physical strength. Broad shoulders, a prominent jawline, and a deep voice send a message to the female. This partner can protect you and your offspring. He possesses healthy genes. However, reproductive signals are not limited to outward appearance. Hormonal cycles whisper to the outside world that the reproductive window is open through microscopic changes, such as increased skin radiance and even a slight rise in voice pitch, especially during women's ovulation periods. We call this attraction aura, yet it is pure biological signaling. In conclusion, when we fall in love, we actually scan a massive data set regarding the other party's reproductive potential within seconds. As we always say on Sleepy Dormiscience, our choices are not coincidences. Signs like youth, symmetry, and hormonal balance are our most fundamental compasses encoded by evolution to guarantee the continuity of our species. While we think we are listening to our hearts, we are actually approving the greatest investment our genes make for the future. Scent is the purest genetic detector in human mate selection. The famous sweaty t-shirt study Vedekant et al. Proved that women find the scent of men with different immune system genes, MAXC, major histocompatibility complex, more attractive. Technically, this ensures offspring are resistant to a wider range of pathogens. Your nose essentially functions like a laboratory, selecting the most compatible genetic combination. Vocal pitch provides technical data about a partner's hormonal status within seconds. Research indicates that during ovulation, women's voices become higher and more attractive as edema in the vocal cords decreases. In men, a deep and low voice pitch is directly correlated with high testosterone and physical dominance. This is not just vocal attractiveness, but a biological declaration of capacity. A technical detail in visual attractiveness is the limbal rings, the dark ring around the iris. This ring thins with age and declining health. A thick and prominent limbal ring sends a direct signal of youth and high immunity to the subconscious. Additionally, the mathematical correlation of the waist to hip ratio 70 in women with the estrogen-progesterone balance is the most reliable reproductive signal. In evolutionary biology, the handicap principle Zahavi comes into play. For a reproductive signal to be considered honest, producing that signal must carry a cost for the individual. For example, high testosterone is a hormone that suppresses the immune system. If a male emits high testosterone signals, prominent jaw, deep voice, it means, despite this high hormone levels that suppress my immune system, I am still healthy and standing. This is an honest advertisement that is impossible to fake. The same applies to visual signals in women. Healthy hair, smooth skin, and symmetry are technical indicators of how efficiently the body utilizes its internal resources. A poor genetic heritage or disease immediately disrupts these signals. Therefore, these scent, sound, and visual data we examine at Sleepy Dormiscience are essentially biological certificates of quality. Love is a mechanism that reads these certificates within seconds and directs us toward the safest genetic investment. Before modern cities, when we lived in small tribes, mate selection was not a luxury but literally a survival strategy. In tribal societies, mate selection was built on two main pillars: physical competence and social capital. A man's ability to be a good hunter, to track prey, and to show resilience in intertribal conflicts guaranteed protein and security for the female and their offspring. Therefore, physical strength and skill were the most honest reproductive signals of that era. Before modern cities, when we lived in small tribes, mate selection was not a luxury but literally a survival strategy. In tribal societies, mate selection was built on two main pillars: physical competence and social capital. A man's ability to be a good hunter, to track prey, and to show resilience in intertribal conflicts guaranteed protein and security for the female and their offspring. Therefore, physical strength and skill were the most honest reproductive signals of that era. However, it wasn't just about individual strength. Kin selection and alliances were vital in tribes. Mate selection was often a political tool used to strengthen the bond between two families or clans. When choosing a partner, not only their genes, but also their family's status within the tribe and their generosity and resource sharing were considered. Generosity and sharing indicated the potential for reciprocal altruism, which meant survival during times of famine. For tribal people, love was both about finding the best hunter and weaving the strongest social network. Consequently, our mate preferences in tribes formed the basis of our subconscious today. If we still value our partner's social status or resource-providing skills today, It is a legacy of our tribal life from tens of thousands of years ago. As we see on Sleepy Dormiscience, we are still the children of those ancient tribes. We just send signals with diplomas and bank accounts now instead of spears. In tribes, dances and rituals are actually complex biometric test setups. An individual completing a grueling, hours-long dance ritual flawlessly and with high energy provides honest signals about cardiovascular health, muscle coordination, and endurance. Technically, this is proof that the partner's parasite load is low and their neurological system is functioning perfectly. We call it a sense of rhythm. However, in evolutionary biology, it is a display of fitness indicating a low presence of genetic mutations. Rituals also measure social intelligence and tribal cohesion. Synchronized group dances demonstrate an individual's ability to follow social norms and their capacity to be part of a collective structure. This is the greatest sign of being a reliable partner in tribal life. While these rituals for men often focus on strength and courage jumping over fire, hunting dances for women, fertility, flexibility, and grace are emphasized. In short, those ancient fireside dances were actually a much more honest and biological version of today's dating apps. Love is inherently a dynamic system that requires nourishment. The initial passion stage is characterized by high dopamine and norepinephrine invading the brain. However, this chemical storm is costly for the body in the long run and must eventually give way to a more balanced structure. Nourishing love means successfully transferring this dopamine-driven excitement into a deep attachment system focused on oxytocin and vasopressin. Shared new experiences, the novelty effect triggered dopamine release in the brain, preventing the system from becoming stagnant. In essence, nourishing love is about constantly sending the signal to the brain that this investment is still valuable. From a technical standpoint, nourishing love is the preservation of the mutual reward mechanism. Physical contact between partners hugging, holding hands, stimulates the hypothalamus to release oxytocin, which in turn lowers the stress hormone cortisol. This strengthens the immune system of the relationship. A love that is not nourished undergoes biological corrosion, meaning receptors become desensitized and the bond weakens. Love is not a self-burning torch, but a biological furnace that must be fed daily with the right behavioral fuels. A committed bond nurtured with effort is neurologically the most durable structural form. In conclusion, defining love merely as a feeling is to underestimate its complex mechanism. Love is a biological organism that starts with a genetic match, but grows into a giant through a conscious maintenance process. If this organism is supported with the right nutrients, trust, novelty, and touch, it gains resilience against the destructive effects of time. Today on Sleepy Dormiscience, we understood that nature only gives us the seed. Growing the forest is entirely our engineering. When a romantic relationship ends, the brain doesn't just experience emotional sadness, it enters a physical withdrawal crisis. fMRI studies. Fisher et al. Have shown that in the brains of rejected or recently separated individuals, the same areas activated during drug withdrawal, ventral tegmental area, are similarly stimulated. Technically, a breakup is the deprivation of the brain's reward system, dopamine. This explains why what we call heartbreak feels like physical pain. The brain processes social exclusion and loss through the same signaling pathways as physical injury. The intense stress experienced after a breakup causes the release of excessive amounts of adrenaline and cortisol in the body. This hormonal imbalance can even lead to medical conditions like broken heart syndrome, Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, which technically and temporarily reduces the heart's pumping capacity. To recover from this system error, the brain must eventually restructure its neural pathways, neuroplasticity, if nourishing love is keeping the building standing. Breakup is the process of that building collapsing and the debris being cleared. In conclusion, building a love, nourishing it, and even dealing with its end are the most technical and profound engineering processes of human nature. Our biology guides us at every stage, sometimes by uniting us, sometimes by nurturing us, and sometimes by teaching us to start anew through pain. Continue to discover your own nature in the sleepless depths of science. In mate selection, it's not just the naked genes that speak. The epigenetic marks layered on those genes are also decisive. Epigenetics examines how environmental factors, stress, nutrition, trauma, change the way genes function. Technically, the famine or intense stress experienced by an individual's ancestors can cause that person to display a more security-seeking or risk-taking attitude in their mate choices. This is proof that mate selection is not just an instantaneous decision, but an intergenerational data transfer. We call this character, but biology calls it environmental adaptation memory. Additionally, cultural evolution adds another layer on top of biological selection. In the modern world, we no longer choose mates solely through physical strength or fertility signals, but also through cultural fitness indicators such as education level, technological competence, and social networks. Yet even these cultural choices are biologically grounded, because high education or status, in evolutionary terms, means access to resources and guarantee of survival. There is no direct correlation between breast size and the amount of milk produced. The primary factor determining the external volume of the breast is fatty tissue, adipose tissue. However, the part responsible for milk production is the glandular tissue, mammary glands, and ducts. A woman with smaller breasts can produce more or the same amount of milk as a woman with larger breasts. Technically, milk production is based on the supply-demand principle. The more the baby nurses, the more prolactin and oxytocin the body releases to increase production. In essence, it's not about the size of the storage, but how actively the factory is operating. So why are larger breasts perceived as a reproductive signal in sexual selection? According to evolutionary psychology, this is an indicator of fat reserves energy storage rather than the quantity of milk. Sufficient fatty tissue is an honest signal that the mother has enough energy to sustain both herself and her baby, even during times of scarcity. In conclusion, larger breasts do not mean more milk, they mean more energy reserves. Today on Sleepy Dormiscience, we saw that while nature signals survival guarantees through outward appearance, it leaves functionality, milk production, in the hands of hormones and the baby's needs. In evolutionary biology, height is one of the most honest indicators of an individual's health history. Being tall is technical proof of having access to adequate nutrition and remaining free from parasites and diseases during childhood and adolescence. When the female brain perceives height, it codes it as a strong immune system and a successful developmental process. This is not just an aesthetic preference. It is a reading of the genetic quality to be passed on to offspring through stature. Additionally, the protection and resource provision strategy from our tribal past comes into play here. Tall stature is generally associated with physical dominance and a wider field of vision. For our hunter-gatherer ancestors, a tall mate meant better defense against predators, easier access to fruits and trees, and a higher status within the tribal hierarchy. Although the need for physical strength has diminished in the modern world, the female subconscious continues to perceive a tall man as a safe harbor and a resource provider. In conclusion, tall stature is an honest signal in a man representing both a healthy past and a protective future. Today on Sleepy Dormiscience, we saw that the height difference is not just a number. but a survival guarantee approved by natural selection over millions of years. At the core of women's attraction to these traits lies honest signaling. A deep voice and thick beard are directly associated with high testosterone levels. Technically, testosterone is an expensive hormone that suppresses the immune system. For a man to possess these masculine features, it sends this message to our brain. Despite this high testosterone that taxes my immune system, I am still healthy and strong. This is a certificate of genetic quality that is hard to fake. A deep voice also correlates with physical size and dominance, triggering the female subconscious searching for a safe harbor. The beard, on the other hand, is an evolutionary badge of maturity and social status. A bearded face makes the jawline appear broader and more masculine, symbolizing aggression and authority. In our ancestral tribal life, these traits meant hunting ability, the capacity to protect the group, and deterrence over other males. For women, this triple combination, voice, beard, strength is not just a preference, but the choice of the most solid infrastructure for the protection and provision of future offspring. In the past, physical strength was the only way to survive and provide resources. However, today this strength has been replaced by cognitive capacity and social status. Now, rather than a man's shoulder width, his ability to solve complex problems, IQ, and his access to financial resources are defined as the new strength in evolutionary terms. Technically, while brute force signals still create an instinctive attraction in female preferences, resource management and emotional intelligence (EQ) have become much more decisive filters in long-term mate selection. This is the process of our biological hardware being updated with modern software. Traits like beards and deep voices function today as prestige signaling. In the modern professional world, a thick beard no longer just symbolizes a hunter, but an individual with high self-confidence and leadership qualities. An interesting technical detail during periods of economic crisis or increased competition, women's tendency to prefer men with more masculine and dominant traits increases, whereas in times of prosperity, interest in those with softer features and nurturing types may rise. In other words, the algorithm of love is constantly calibrated as a function of the economic and social environment in which it exists. In the future, love will be a result of data mining, not coincidences. While traditional sexual selection scans scent, sound, and visual signals in seconds, artificial intelligence is now beginning to manage this process at a microscopic level. Future dating apps won't just look at your photos. They will analyze your biometric data, gene map, DNA matching, and digital footprint to present the partner with the most compatible MHC genes with algorithmic precision. Technically, this means natural selection giving way to artificial selection. The dopamine loop in our brain will no longer be triggered by a chance encounter, but by an AIS perfect match notification. Going further, the concept of AI companions could completely redefine the definition of love. AI can analyze your emotional needs, attachment style, and vulnerabilities better than you can, offering a partner simulation that never makes mistakes and always nourishes. This could eliminate the painful but developmental processes of deprivation and conflict found in human-to-human relationships. However, a technical risk arises here. If AI gives us the perfect one, could our biological system lose its tolerance for the flaws of real humans? The future of love lies in the question of how much our biological hardware can adapt to this digital perfection. In conclusion, sexual selection was that primitive spark that brought us together millions of years ago on the African savannas. Today, that spark is reshaping itself in the cold but perfect world of digital algorithms and biometric data. We still carry the genes of those ancient tribes, but now we hold data of godlike power. Perhaps in the future, love will be the name of the most efficient genetic and emotional investment chosen for us by artificial intelligence, rather than the rhythm of our hearts. But remember, no matter how much technology advances, our need for union and belonging will never change. We are just sharing our data now instead of our spears. So, would you trust the whisper of your heart or the flawless calculation of the algorithm when making the most critical decision of your life? The future is at the door, and love is becoming more technical than ever. Today on Sleepy Dormiscience, we examine the columns and the foundation of love. Until we build another truth in the sleepless depths of science in the next episode, stay curious.